what I want to ask you about Frank Martin and Shakur Stevenson is that Martin started boxing at 18 years old, and he's coming up against Stevenson, who's been boxing since he was a kid. And often you hear guys who start late say they notice a difference when they come up against guys who've been boxing all their lives from a young age. You get guys like Wilder, who has the equalizer with power. He started late, but he had the power.
Yeah,
You get guys like Marciano, for example. He had that conditioning where he was non-stop punching at you, so he overcame starting late. Does Frank Martin have anything which can overcome that sort of gap in experience with Shakur Stevenson, who's an elite fighter, which you're going to need to sort of bridge that gap when you fight someone like Stevenson? Does Martin have that trait, do you think?
It's funny because I like Frank Martin a lot. I think that, his last fight, fans like to judge guys by their last performance. This is a what have you done for me world that we live in. And, unfortunately, fair or unfair, that's the last thing people remember. So that's what they're going to judge him upon. The Michelle Rivera fight kind of gets thrown out the window, what he did in that particular fight there, where he used movement. He was fainting, he was on and off the line, all the things that he wasn't doing in his last fight that he struggled with. I think that for him to have a shot at this fight, he's probably going to try to, well, first thing first, he has to get punches off at a rapid pace. Like, he can't wait and set up shots. Frank has a tendency of doing that. And he gets a sharpshooter like Shakur, who dictates pace. So you have to kind of dictate the flow and not allow for Shakur to dictate the rhythm of the fight. And, try to rough Shakur up on the inside. There was a video earlier where Shakur talked about getting hit with a body shot from Oscar Valdez. That he said he was hurt by it. Now, this could be Shakur is a very, very smart individual. You hear him talk. He's not your average fighter where he's just going to give you the run of the mill. I just got to be better than him that night. Now, he can really break fights down like he's an analyst. He's a really well-schooled kid. So when I hear him talk about this Oscar Valdez body shot, it could just be, him playing mind games, with his opponents. I don't know. Is he being honest? Is this gamemanship? I don't know. But it doesn't matter if we know or not. For Frank Martin, he can, go in there trying to overanalyze and overthink it because he can outbox Shakur. You and I, Frank Martin team knows that that's not going to work. You can't outbox Shakur. So the only thing that you have on your side is, hopefully try to make it a more of a physical affair, try to keep the distance because Shakur is so good at controlling range and distance. So you got to kind of pick your poison on what you want to do. So maybe the close proximity thing may work. It's hard to say because we really never saw anybody really give Shakur any problems. He did fight this one guy, and I'm drawing a blank, and he got a lot of criticism from Andre Ward about not being more active. This was Shakur I'm talking about. And that guy had like an awkward style. And again, Shakur being the astute, well-pointed, well-thought-out specimen he is, he said, yeah, he was awkward, and I didn't want to get caught with a shot I didn't see. And at the time, he was like 22, 22. Like, you don't normally hear young fighters talking like that. He was talking like a coach. He stepped outside of the fighter body and was talking like a coach. It was like, I wasn't going to overcommit to something to a guy who was awkward. It's like he was unapologetic about not letting his hands go. So when you have guys like that, it's hard to find chinks in their armor. So at this point, what do you have to lose if you're Frank Martin? I just think that, he's been at 135 longer. He has a 28, was he 28, 29? I don't know how old he is now, Frank Martin. I know he's
28, yeah, I think he's 28 now.
28. Shakur is 25, 26.
26, yeah.
Shakur is more experienced, obviously, even though he's younger. You just mentioned the pedigree. Shakur also, I think, has underrated strength, like so many great fighters that came before him. So I wouldn't bank on that. I don't want people to, lose what I'm saying. I'm just trying to draw some blood from somewhere to make my point stretch. And I just think that the only way that Frank has a shot at making this a competitive fight, I think, is that he's going to have to, keep the fight at a short range. And just hope for the best.
Yeah, because I mean, we often say that in our gym. If you're fighting someone, if you're sparring someone more experienced, you can't let them fight at their pace. They're more experienced. They're going to pick you apart. So you have to close that gap of experience by forcing pressure, making the more experienced guy fight at a pace he doesn't want to go at.
Yeah,
but the thing we notice about Shakur Stevenson is that he fights like he's so relaxed. He's literally like Pernell Whitaker, that he can stand in front of you in range and he'll make you miss just by minimal movement.
Yeah.
So how does Frank Martin then? You mentioned exactly the same as that. Force the pace. How does Frank Martin get around that? Because Stevenson, he'll make you miss by centimeters or millimeters and come back and hit you with a 2, 3, 4 shots. How does Martin get around that? Get Stevenson out of his comfort zone, which I haven't seen anyone do. Stevenson looks like he fights in first gear, and no one's taking him out of that first gear yet. He looks like he's got a lot more levels to his game, which we might see if Frank Martin does force that pace.
That's my fear, is what you just said. There's gears that, like, I talk to a lot of people that's around the sport, like you do, and and they told me that this guy is not just this finesse boxer. Like, he's beating up a lot. He's dog walking guys in sparring sessions, guys that smaller, bigger, same size, what have you. Is like he has a physical aspect of his game that we haven't seen yet. So, well, guess what? Let's see it. And this is my thing. Like, if you know that you can't do what you saw, or you can't outbox them, all right. Well, if you guys are telling me that he has this physical aspect to his game, now listen. Frank Martin is not exactly this 100% physical guy either. Like, I don't have no evidence that he can just go on the inside and become Nick Campbell, where he could just fight within between 6 inches of space. Like, I don't have no evidence of that either. But it's just, you have to try something, like, to your point, because you can't fight him from a certain distance or range, because he's going to embarrass you. Like, he just know how to get out of the way. He controls you with a probing jab, and just frustrate guys. And when guys get frustrated, they start doing silly things. They start leaving their feet, jumping into stuff. So you just gotta figure out a way to, like, you brought up a key word. And I think if you go through the history of fights, guys that have problems, look, Ricardo Mayorga, Vernon Suarez, Juan, Jose Luis Castillo, Mayweather won. Strange things have happened in fight, but you got to have the fortitude and the dog mentality to say, hey, I'm going all out, and I'm going to, do some things out of my comfort zone as well, and try to make it uncomfortable for the guy, and see, do he got another gear he can go to from a physical aspect.
Yeah, you mentioned Nate Campbell. I mean, I've heard Nate Campbell talk about how to punch someone below the belt without the referee noticing. That's what Frank Martin will need to do.
When guys, I'm not advocating, obviously, hurting another fighter, but when you're in the ring and you're the less skilled guy, look, Nate fought a lot of guys that was way more talented than he was, but he had a knack in a way of doing some borderline things and making, again, go to the Juan Diaz fight where he just made that kid up. Now, Shakur obviously is on a whole nother level than the Juan Diaz, but you get what I'm saying. It's just like, you got to just try things,
Yeah. But that's another thing of, yeah. I mean, with Stevenson as well, when he punches, he looks like he's holding back, as he's not punching full out. So he's always balanced. He'll throw combinations, and he's in perfect position again, perfect balance. He's never overextending, overreaching for his shots. Whereas Martin, I've seen him. He likes to use that slip counter shot. He's not going to get that chance with Stevenson.
No.
Stevenson's always balanced. It's a tough ask, but yeah, I mean, like you said, he has to do something, doesn't he? Take Stevenson out of his game somehow.
I mean, you got to remember too that great fighters look for moments like this. This is a coming out party for Shakur Stevenson, right? You got this is probably the best. Like, if just excluding Gervonta Davis and Lomachenko because Devin Haney's no longer a lightweight. We got that verified because he's relinquished his WBC belt, which is the belt that they're fighting for, which is the WBC belt. So Frank is the best guy there that Shakur has fought probably in his career, you know.
Yeah.
So I think when guys like Shakur get this opportunity, this is kind of when what you talked about is when they like to show their repertoire, what more to their repertoire, what they have in store. So, it's gonna be it's a tall task. I'm not gonna not gonna be, try to sugarcoat it, but I think it's a good fight for Shakur because look, we brought up examples where strange things have happened. Shakur got to bring his A game too, so. Because Frank is
Shakur Stevenson, so Stevenson's fought the likes of Jamal Herring, Oscar Valdez.
Oscar Valdez, yeah. Which people kind of like to discredit, but I'm like, Oscar Valdez, yeah, he's a good fighters that he just, because he at the level that he's at, and I'm drawing a blank of the Brazilian, the kid from South.
Robinson Conceição.
Yeah. He's an Olympian. Like fans just like he's got, he was no to you, he's nobody. But to the boxing public and the masses, no, these are people have pedigrees. And he's making them look like amateurs, so.
So who has Frank Martin fought then to prepare him for someone like Stevenson?
Nobody. But there's nobody here. It's like
but Stevenson's fought some top guys. Yeah, Stevens fought some top guys though as well. I mean, Herring and Valdez are extremely good fighters in my opinion. Who was the best fighter that Martin's fought?
Oh, Michelle Rivera, hands down. Listen, going into that fight, I believe Frank Martin was an underdog, if I'm not mistaken, going into that fight. Now, Michelle Rivera, again, that kid had a pedigree, way beyond.
Is this the Julian Jackson lookalike?
Oh, I thought he was supposed to be Muhammad Ali lookalike.
I saw him like Julian Jackson.
He calls himself Ali Rivera, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he had Ali on his shorts, didn't he?
He has the white short. Yeah, it was funny because I'm like, who the hell is this kid? Like dressed like Ali. It's funny. No, I can see why you said, because somebody probably why is he saying Julian Jackson? His hairstyle is somewhat feminine. That's funny. I never thought about that, but that's actually kind of funny.
So he beat Rivera convincingly, though.
It was one of the most polished technical fights that I saw last year. And I had that on my technical list. Like from a technical standpoint, he did everything right. He did everything right. But to answer your question, that's his biggest win. And look, the dude he fought, the Armenian guy, the Olympian that he fought.
Artem, was it? Artem?
Artem. I don't butcher his name.
Was it his last fight?
That was his last fight. And look, he dropped that guy, twice? He dropped him or hurt. I can't remember. But look, that was a fight that he was having trouble with. Some people thought he was losing that fight up until until he dropped him. But, listen, Martin is a well-conditioned athlete. Shout out to Derek James, who like everybody like to get on and kill now, after one loss. But Derek keeps his fighters well-conditioned and well-trained. And Frank Martin was very fluid in that 12th round. Like Jermell is fluid in his 12 rounds. Spence go on, before the Crawford's debacle. One thing that you could always say about Earl Spence was that, he was conditioned and ready to go all 36 minutes, and he's conditioned to break you down. And that's a tribute to Derek, that his fighters are always well conditioned. And I think that that's another thing that Frank has going for him, that maybe he could take Shakur to a place he's never been as a pro, in the deep waters, and a fight that's still on the table, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen of Martin, he makes good use of angles, very subtle use of angles.
He does use angles.
He's a solid puncher, and you can, that clearly breaks people down because he's got good power. He's might a bit like Larry Holmes in the sense that you don't see him as a big puncher, but those punches hurt and they accumulate. He puts things behind him. Yeah.
Punches you don't see hurt the most, but he definitely, he's not like you said, he's not like a one punch knockout guy, but to your point, he punches from angles, and he's not extremely fast, but it's fast enough where it can be problematic, if you're not on your P's and Q's. So yeah, I think I think it's going to be a good fight. I know a lot of people, and look, I'm about as high as on Shakur as anybody. I think that, like, boxing wise, he has taken the banner from the Andre Wards, the Mayweathers, the Bud Crawfords. Even though Bud is still here, but I think he's the next scientist to, like, kind of
Yeah,
represent the club. You know.
I kind of compare him a little bit to Sugar Ray Leonard in a sense that you look at Leonard and Stevenson, and they look like innocent guys, big
Yeah,
happy smiles. But when they get in
yeah,
the ring, no, they're mean
killing.
and they're gonna hurt you. But
And
yeah,
I
I
and
think
I'm glad
he's the next
you
superstar.
brought up, I'm glad you brought up the killer part because I do think that Shakur had got this rap for being a safety first guy, right? Like he's not going to finish off his opponent. And the guy he fought in his last fight, which was his, I believe it was his 135 debut, and he got a knockout, you know. And
Yeah,
I do think at this weight, he's going to be finishing guys.
yeah, because
Um,
he was a dude at 130. He was a big guy. He looked big.
and that the weight cuts, man. You know, you're a fitness guy, man. You run a gym. Them weight cuts is serious. I don't think people understand, like, you know, when guys aren't fighting at their natural and appointed weight classes, and then when they do, it's like night and day. You know,
Yeah.
not all the time, but for the most part, it's like night and day. You know, so you know, we'll see.